Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast.
Today's show is brought to you by our K4B Profit Snapshot. Here's one question worth sitting with. If you stepped away from your business for 30 days, would it grow or contract? That answer tells you a lot about where you really stand. Try the free 5-minute snapshot. It measures process, profit, and personal freedom. Link is in the show notes.
Question to the audience. Why does collaboration in your team feel chaotic and slow? Our guest will unpack how leaders and teams can move collaboration out of chaos by building trust, using human-centered design, and running small, low-risk experiments that turn good ideas into real progress without burnout or endless meetings. Our guest today is Katie Meldrew from the Collective Knot. She's a facilitator and innovation strategist and founder of the Collective Knot. With a background in engineering and human-centered design, and she's originally from Ireland, which you'd probably be able to tell by her voice, she began her career in civil engineering that played a hands-on role in rebuilding Christchurch in New Zealand after the 2011 earthquakes. As an innovation lead at WorkSafe New Zealand, Katie worked across diverse industries, helping organizations tackle complex challenges by applying practical human-centered approaches that improve safety, health, and real-world outcomes. Now based in Prince Edward Island, she partners with public and private sector teams to foster collaboration, align around purpose, and de-risk innovation so good ideas actually stick. A self-described engineer turned innovation facilitator and the mind behind the flower-growing side business, The Petal Pusher, Katie believes strong teams and healthy gardens thrive on the same essentials: clear systems, patience, and genuine care. Katie, an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
Yes, I do have a favorite quote, or one that kind of sticks in my mind a lot of the time. And it's a team is not a group of people who work together. A team is a group of people who trust each other. And I think that's attributed to Simon Sinek.
And what is your tagline for your business?
Helping teams align and decide and move forward with confidence.
You know, when I first heard your journey and you said, listen, I was into this space, I was in engineering, and now, and then that journey. What shifted you from the engineering universe, which is like, these are how things go together and this is how you build on things, towards facilitation? What drew that? What drew your interest into that space?
I think with engineering, when I wanted to be an engineer, I thought about building houses in Africa or building some sort of like slow sand filter to filtrate the water in third world countries and stuff like that. So I was always gravitated towards this value of contribution, like how can I contribute? And when I graduated engineering in Ireland, I was kind of working part-time in a restaurant. And one of the girls that I worked with was from Christchurch, and she told me all about how the earthquakes had affected her hometown. So immediately I was, okay, that sounds like something that really aligns with my values, contribution. And the next day I was in the visa office, and a month later I was on a flight to Christchurch. I got to be involved in Christchurch. There was a big alliance program called SCIRT. It was a Stronger Christchurch Infrastructure Rebuild Team. And they were tasked with repairing or redesigning all the damaged infrastructure, horizontal infrastructure in Christchurch. So the roads, bridges, all the pipes underground, everything, all the horizontal infrastructure. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that alliance. I was like, okay, I felt like I could contribute and make a difference. What I found is that contribution almost felt very indirect. Like I had a small part of a program, I would design it, and it would take a long time for it to get built and to be of value to the community. And even then, when I go over the Confederation Bridge, like I'm always amazed by how much of an engineering feat it is. And I'm sure most people just drive over a bridge and it's just another bridge. And so I miss that indirect feeling of contribution. And in the alliance, in the SCIRT Alliance, they had performance coaches. And one of the things that they were doing was these goal setting workshops. And I asked if I could co-facilitate one, and they said no problem. They gave me my little part. And I just fell in love with the idea of helping people have aha moments, giving them more clarity, people leaving more motivated, more empowered. And it was this kind of like instant feedback of contribution. And ever since that, I wanted to do more and more of it. So I sought out like more opportunities to facilitate until I landed in Canada and kind of made it my whole business, really.
As you described, talking about infrastructure, and here in Canada, we have older infrastructure. And in fact, if you listen to the news, you hear something about out west. There's one city, the water main popped again, actually where it broke last time, or near where it broke last time. And it's age related. When you're dealing with an infrastructure, and in this case in New Zealand, is there? I mean, it's one thing to have legacy, but there's infrastructure legacy, and then there's also the legacy of we've always done it this way. Was the facilitation helping you get around that? Obviously, things had to get fixed, and they had to get fixed in a timely manner. But what stopped it being done the same way it was done before? Because if it's easier because we've done it this way before, we don't have to learn new tricks, right? So it's the old dog. How did you work around that?
One of the things that Skirt was really good for was the Duncan, who was in charge, was very good at reinforcing what the purpose was. And it was about building resilient infrastructure. The word resilient was used a lot. And so kind of with that word in mind, like people came up with new ideas. And the way they set up that whole alliance was just prime for innovation and allowing people to be innovative. Like there was the conditions there that people could try new things. And the other interesting thing was it was made up of companies that are largely competitors. Usually they would like compete for work. So even though there was different teams within the same building, you had like similar to Canada, the likes of WSP and Stantec and ACOM and GHD all in the same building with different projects, but kind of also working together. And that sparked a lot of idea sharing and information sharing, not initially, but like people would start talking about ideas and what ideas were better for the situation. And there was always different options. And so I think just that whole environment could be, nobody could kind of leave it like as it was, or nobody could kind of play it non-innovative. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's the other part of it. It's project management, but it's on in this particular case is even on a larger scale. How do you make sure that if because if you think back to your training as an engineer, this is how we build this. This is how we do that, and these how you adapt things. But if I'm handling water supply, whether it's fresh water or wastewater, versus electricity versus gas, the utilities, and then road structure, for heavier vehicle traffic and so forth, or even bridge work. These are all like different boxes, right? Because the engineer does electrical, doesn't do plumbing typically. How do you bring it so that it comes in and breathes a life that it's in sync? It's working together, because every once in a while you hear about tradespeople, the plumber complains about electrician because, the electrician wants to cut holes through the wall and going, yeah, you're cutting right where my pipes are, bud. Don't do that. How do you keep everybody in sync so that, great idea, but have it aligned?
I think having all the expertise in one place definitely helped. There was definitely, if you needed a specialist, they were all in the building. So, and it was kind of like a flat structure where it was set up in a way where you felt like you could go and talk to anybody. Another thing that they did, which isn't really traditional in engineering projects, is they had early contractor involvement. So usually with a typical design and build contract, a consultant or designer will design something and then it goes to tender and different contractors compete for it and then somebody wins. And then they have to build the thing that the engineers have designed. And sometimes that's really challenging for them because the design might be tricky or there might be something that the engineer didn't take account for. And one of the really cool things about Skirt was when a project was at different stages, we had the contractor come in that was assigned to that job. And we would say, here's our options so far. What do you think? And they would say, well, I don't think we should do it that way because of these reasons. Or, we should do it this way because the way the road is set up, or it'll make traffic management easier. And so having that really helped, like designing something that was going to be easier and more robust for the contractor to build. That was a really cool feature.
So the art of collaboration, it's not a vibe, it's a skill. And
Mhm.
so I think that part of collaboration also means you're focused on the human centric look of things. What does that mean in plain business terms? Like, you've experienced it in a large refurbishment recovery situation in New Zealand. What does that mean in a non, you know, infrastructure, getting things back online? There's great import, everybody's on board. But in a smaller business environment, how do you get everybody in that same framework? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, from a collaboration point of view or from a human-centered point of view?
Why, yes. Why, yes to both.
There's when I think back on Skirt, like in terms of collaboration, for me personally, and everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. My perspective is that I saw this shift over time where when I went in initially, people were very guarded with their IP. And because they're naturally competitors, and at some point the rebuild will be over and they'll be back to their normal jobs competing for the same work. And so, there was a kind of a protectionism over their IP. But what I saw over time was the fact that the leader, Duncan, like every time we had a meeting, repeated the purpose, why we were here, building resilient infrastructure that gives people confidence in the future of Christchurch. Like that was like a mantra. It was all over the walls. And so people really, really knew what the purpose was and focused on that. And also, we did a lot of kind of social things, like the ways to connect with each other, like cross-pollinating across the different teams. And so you could see the trust build up over time. Like it's not something that can happen like quickly. And so I saw this transformation of with a clear purpose and a clear vision, people have really good direction. When it's for the greater good, silos fall away a little bit. And also building that trust then over time, I saw more and more people share IP, share ideas. Like I remember when I went to a different team initially and said, hey, you're the expert in this type of retaining wall. I think it would be a good option for my project, but I don't really know a lot about it. Like, can you share, you help me? And at the start, it was like, oh no, I can't. I'll let you run but if you give me numbers, I'll run it in my software. And then towards the end of my time there, it was like, here's my software, feel free to use it. So it was just this really nice transition over time. And then that's when I realized how much like purpose and trust are like the sandwich of collaboration, but they need to be nurtured. And then the human-centered approach to anything really is about putting your end user in the center of what you do, like really understanding their needs, their interests, their pain points, like being obsessed with them almost, in order to design something that's really meaningful and that they will use. Like it's going to add a lot of value because you really know who the person is, like that you're designing for. And so that's harder in engineering because you're designing for in infrastructure, lots of different people that are going to use the infrastructure, but in different organizations where it's like a different product or service, then that becomes really important, especially in today's day and age when there's a lot of competition and attention split between different things that people could use. Like, how do you know your user really, really well, better than anybody else, in order to create something that they will find really valuable and meaningful?
So, if a company is coming up with a brand new idea, I'm now walking away from the it's broken, let's fix it as a team, or a large corporation. But someone's coming together and they're going to bring forward a new idea. There's a genesis of some point. Someone's recognized a problem, or someone has a solution that going from horse and buggy to motorcycle to how and when innovation comes together, what usually kind of cripples it, from the aha to that's unfortunate.
Sometimes the word innovation itself can can get in the way. I think innovation is kind of a loaded term, and sometimes
Yeah.
people are really empowered and energized by it, and other people feel really threatened and exhausted by it. And it's like, what is innovation really? Is it incremental? Like, does it hug the line of continuous improvement to this like almost Steve Jobs transformational innovation? And so in WorkSafe, we moved away from using the word innovation and using the word better work, because that's easier for people to think about and manage. I just need to make my work better. And if you have a team that already has a full workload, and then you're like, hey, we're going to innovate some new stuff, Like they're how like do this. And so the other side of that is usually sizing something correctly for what people already have on their plate. Like if you have a whole like a dedicated innovation team and that's their job, it's easier for them. But if you're doing something that's a whole organization, like redesigning something where you want everyone to be on board or involved in some way, it really needs to be sized right so it feels manageable. And then the other aspect of that is it really needs leadership buy-in. Brought people together for this kind of mission orientated innovation style way of working with like diverse backgrounds and perspectives and different organizations, and everyone was really keen to collaborate, but there was this kind of feeling of, well, we could do all this work, but how are we gonna actually make it happen, because there's no key decision maker in the room, or there's no key decision maker that's been bought into it initially at the start that will say, hey, whatever comes out of this, we'll give it a go. So they're probably the most important things.
There's I see a notation about micro experiments for risk reduction for smaller teams. Walk me through what you mean by micro experiments. My headspace, I think I go like, yep, prove the point. No, not prove the point, but prove that an element works. But what is a micro experiment?
Yeah. So how I think about micro experiments is like the analogy of in aviation, that 1 in 60 rule. If a pilot is 1 degree off, then for every 60 miles, they will be 1 mile like off. So I think it's like something like New York to Los Angeles, you might be like 40 miles off and in the Pacific Ocean. So pilots always have to readjust their course to make sure they're on track, and like little tweaks accounting for weather and everything else that they have to account for. And that's how I view micro experiments in a organizational context. It's like, how can we design a quick test, even if it's just talking to one customer to validate something, to make sure that we're on the right track and aligned all the time. And maybe we talk to somebody and they say, that's not really a priority for me. This thing is more important than that thing. Then you know, okay, that's the thing we should focus on as a priority. And let's put that as center, maybe something else, and then test that with somebody else. And it's always kind of readjusting to make sure that you're aligned on where you want to get to.
I'm going to touch on a bit back to New Zealand one more time. How big was that operation? Like how many people were involved at its maximum flow? Obviously, it starts off small and starts to, gains weight of, based on the number of people. Is there a maximum size that, becomes too unwieldy? I've been told in the past, that in the healthcare, there's a nurse manager and she'll have, or he will have like 130 people, but in real, in practical terms, you can only manage maybe 15, top end 30 people. Is there a kind of a size ratio? Because you got to do the rahs to keep them on and going forward, right? Is there a size consideration, or even how it's shaped so that that you can manage it? Obviously, if you have 200 people, right, you can't know all. Well, you can get to know them, but
Yeah. Well, let's say there was 200 in that building, and so the way the alliance was set up was there was 5 large contractors, and then a whole series of designers, planners, and asset managers, and people like that did like the CAD and the all the kind of like drawings and everything else that we needed. I think what they like the way they broke it up. So there was 4 teams in the design building, we'll call it. So there was a red team, blue team, orange team, and yellow team, and each team will say it had about 50 people, like probably close to it. And it always felt manageable. And so those different teams would get different packets of work, and there would be a budget and a deadline. So all those kind of KPIs were tracked. And the teams were kind of, their progress was up on the board. So you could see how the red team was doing compared to the blue team and the yellow team and the orange team. And so it was competitive, but it never really felt like competitive, if that makes sense. Like it was not, you wanted to be the best and you wanted your team to do really well, but it wasn't at the expense of somebody else's team, because everyone was there to help build a community, help rebuild a city. And so I think the way they broke it down was really good. I think if you had 200 people on one team trying to effectively manage projects, it probably would have felt different.
So it sounds like, yeah, there's a level of trust you have to build up to get that momentum going, that everybody, blue team's got bigger budget than I do. Or they're more successful or sooner. How do you make sure that, the trust, in other words, it's a competition, but it's not a competition against each other. It's a more competition in getting done. How do you make sure that, the trust stays intact?
I think Skirt did a really good job at one, again, just to reiterate the whole purpose thing. Like, because once people feel like they're there for the greater good, it feels less competitive. Also, every week we would have a whole kind of office toolbox talk on progress and updates, and again, why we're here, why we're doing this. And we had a lot of social events that helped people from different teams connect with each other. And there was lots of sports teams. And also people had like opportunity to do things that they probably normally wouldn't get to do in their normal office environment. Like for me, asking, hey, can I help with these workshops? And somebody just saying, yeah, sure. If you think you can add value, if you want to do it, then like we'll help you do it. And I had a lot of faith that they trusted me to deliver something like that. If I said I was going to do it, I wanted to deliver it for everybody. So then I'm running this, I'm co-facilitating this workshop with different people from different groups, trying to help them get more clarity or alignment or be more empowered or like motivated towards their goals. So there was a lot of kind of cross-pollination outside of just the work, where people developed really good kind of bonds. Yeah.
So when you're having a project come together, I'll leave the New Zealand example alone. You're working with an agency or a company. Nothing's ever 100%. Like, in other words, I want to turn on a light switch. 99% of the time it comes on, unless of course the bulb burns out or the power's dropped, right? And that's kind of a fail point. And the word fail is kind of maybe a misnomer. Just it isn't going according to plan. What happens when you encounter something like that? Like, your team comes up and it's like, it's not working, or they're frustrated because they've tried different avenues and, they haven't had a resolution yet. How do you manage that so that everybody stays positive and stays focused?
I'm laughing. I had a situation last year that was very like this. Um, and sometimes it's hard. So self-awareness is really important in the work that I do, because I I might have a tried and true tested framework that I've used with teams and got really, really good results. And I go, okay, this process will work for this team. And in the middle, it's not working. And so I really need to, it's easy for me to go, well, this works for other teams. So the people are the problem. People are the problem. But it's not. It's like, okay, what I need to be, okay, what do I need to change? What is not working here? What do people need? What do people need from this situation, and what needs to change? And that is my favorite part of facilitation. Like the chaos of me having to adapt in the moment and being good enough that I have a toolkit that's big enough that I can adapt in the moment. So usually if something like that happens, I can quickly get a sense as to why. And so I usually have a plan A, B, C, D, depending on how the first part of the workshop goes and what I think the outcome might be. And I think if it's tracking this way, then this is the path I need to follow. And if it's gone off the rails, I think it's because of this, and this is what I need to do now. So yeah, it's that problem solving and the adrenaline that goes with that. That is like I thrive off that.
Well, and you know what? That's awesome. So when you're running a workshop and people are coming together, is the workshop a one and done, or is it a one and we meet again on a cycle, like once a week? It's almost like doing a one-on-one coaching with somebody, right? Like you're an athlete. Okay, you got to start practicing. And what are you encountering? Is your body injured from doing a certain task? And on goes the story. How do you work with the team?
Yeah, it's different. Some of them are one and done, and then some of them are more longer term. I prefer the more longer term ones. I feel like the one and done, people can get a lot of benefit out of it. I can teach them tools, give them really good resources, but people will naturally default into business as usual. I'm also a qualified personal trainer. I did that in New Zealand. And so I really understand the importance of accountability. And where I can, I will have longer engagements so that I can be that kind of coach to make sure that people stay on track. Like last year was a really good mix of kind of one-offs and also longer engagements. So I did kind of I was involved in an 8 to 12 week program where I came in to help co-facilitate at different points to keep people on track, like through different stages of this process. And that was really good because you could see the momentum building up. Um, so where I can, it's a longer term engagement and being there for more accountability because I know it will stick, but it really depends on the organization's budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. When should an organization go, this isn't working out so well? What's the flags they should be paying attention to that goes, you know what, we've got to reach out to that young lady, Katie. We're hitting the wall. What are the flags they should be looking for?
I think when teams are stuck, people get really quiet and people will sit on their work because they're stuck, spinning their wheels. And that usually, one thing I learned about teamwork from Christchurch is that the more dynamic it is, the better, in a way, where people are rallying around each other to solve problems. And that doesn't normally happen in in organizations that I've worked with to some extent. Like people have their portion of work and they will sit on things and spin their wheels because they don't want to be seen to not know what they're doing. That kind of whole human psychology of fear of judgment or fear of failure. And so usually teams come to me when people are spinning their wheels, when they've tried something a few times and it hasn't worked. Or they feel like the team isn't aligned and one person's going and doing this and somebody else is going and doing this. And then there's a lot of rework involved and time and effort and energy that's been wasted. So they're usually the key things.
It's interesting. The last little bit you're mentioning, one person's going one direction, the other person's going the other direction, and it's the sum result is it's no further gain. Do you? And if they say two different departments, and again, I'm thinking back to my days in corporate, right? You can have the finance department, the purchasing department, and then the facilities department. Facilities needs a piece of product to get installed. Finance is going, who's got the money, and then purchasing kicks in and says, oh, we got to do the procurement process, right? And and if it's timely, it becomes a little bit of a heartache and a headache to have these things come together. And everybody's got has a reason, a raison d'être why they do what they do, and for good reason. And it's not just I just want to block you. How do you get that alignment to come through? In other words, to expedite it. If you're in an emergency situation, it's really apparent. But if it's a longer term project, but it has this significant impact to the organization, how do you get them to kind of align? Going, okay, you each have a primary function, but we have to adapt. And you don't want to compromise the morals or the ethics. How do you get them kind of working through that?
I think sometimes with teams, sometimes things get lost in translation. When I say I need to do this or I need this, somebody else might have a different picture of what that looks like. And so I found that getting people to agree on what the outcome is, like to understand what the outcome is and to help. If you understand what the outcome is, then in human-centered design thinking, like one of the tools that people use a lot is a customer journey map or a user journey map. And so you map out the process that needs to happen. And when it's all mapped out and visual, people can see that really clearly. And people can say, this is where you're going to have a bottleneck, or this is where there's tension, this is where there's opportunity, this is where I need to come in, this is where you need to come in. And so laying that out gives people a good sense of how do we need to move through this together, who needs to come in where, and how do we keep it moving, and what are kind of our trade-offs or kind of lag times on things that might take a little bit longer. That's probably the main thing. It's usually the fastest thing for me is getting the right people in the room to visualize something so that everyone understands what the process is or what the outcome needs to be.
I love communications. Especially when it's geared to there's another person we've done a podcast with, and he says, listen, I deal with the people that have made tech, and then they're going to go look for money for that tech. So looking for funding. And he becomes the translator from tech speak to finance speak. So I think that's kind of a key piece. And I guess that would kind of be the essence of your role. Then you're kind of doing that translation and getting them to see the different pictures. Would that be a fair enough statement?
Yeah, sometimes.
Prototypes. So if someone comes up with an idea, they're sitting back going, there might be a better way to do something and to approach a common problem. And the driver might be cost effectiveness, time effectiveness, and labor effectiveness, or it's just better outcome for the client or guest. How do you bring forward something like, okay, we're not rebuilding a whole city, but we're looking to improve, and it could be like how we lay pipe down in the future. How do you bring in a prototype that gets everybody on board? In other words, you're almost like R&D.
I think again, I would go back to, in terms of bringing in a prototype, I think sizing that prototype is one of the key things. If you have people that have a dedicated role to this, it's easier. But usually what I found in organizations is people are being asked to do more with their same hours that they have. So sizing something right, definitely important. Does this person have 2 hours or 3 hours that they can do? What is the ultimate goal? And what is one thing, one aspect of that we could prototype or test really quickly to prove that there's value in doing more of this? And so a lot of the times, people have to write business cases for stuff like this to make sure that it gets more traction, like further up. But having something where I have this idea, and it's like design thinking and that whole mindset of show, don't tell
Mhm.
is also very key, because again, words get lost in translation, and I could say a word and it could mean something very different to somebody else. And so the ability to be able to show, don't tell, even something like with prototyping, if it's a service, you could do something like a wireframe, or you could do something on a software like Figma, which is kind of like a real kind of click through feel of going through a website. And that doesn't take a lot of time. And it can be scrappy, but it gives people a sense of something visual that they can touch or feel or see, and gives them a sense of, yeah, this thing could add value. So with prototypes, it's kind of about sizing. How can you show, don't tell? And how can you create the conditions? How can you create almost like a business case where people see the value in doing more of this thing?
So would it be fair to say then your role as a facilitator then would incorporate these elements? So if a company says, listen, we're running into a situation, or we're doing an evolution of our workplace or a review, whatever the case might be, that would be what you would do. You would gather all the necessary players and then provide deeper analysis.
Yes, like specifically for ideation and potential prototyping, like I might do an ideation session, and I usually invite people to come up with, blue sky ideas, wild cards, kind of silly things that they probably hold in their mind, but they don't necessarily verbalize because they will stop themselves. They'll think of something that could be really cool, and then they say, oh no, that won't work because of X, Y, and Z. And so it never gets a chance to be tested or be evaluated. And so after an ideation session, to make it a little bit more concrete, I will sometimes do like an effort impact matrix, so a 2 by 2
Mhm.
matrix. And what are the things that are going to give us the biggest impact? And what are the things that are kind of the least or the most amount of effort? And so the things that are in the box that are really high impact and low effort, which means that they take less time or resources, they're kind of like the low hanging fruit. They're the ones that, like, okay, we could test these pretty quickly um, as a way to see if this is a solution to the challenge that we have.
Excellent. So, engineer or gardener, who's more patient under pressure?
I I think probably a gardener.
Yeah, you're
There's just so much you can't control with agriculture. It's so hard. I think that engineers need to come up with solutions faster, because there's usually safety implications if there's an issue. Um, and gardeners, whether you have lots of rain or you have no rain at all, you really have to. Yeah, patience is a big one. for gardening.
What's the smallest change that creates momentum?
I think in a team, people knowing that they're appreciated, like even a thank you from a manager or somebody else in the team saying, I really appreciate your work. I think that generates a lot of momentum really quickly, and it's such a small gesture.
Absolutely. So, Katie, what part of the universe do you play in? Is it just East Coast, nationally, continental, global? Go play.
Hopefully global. At the moment, it's a lot of Atlantic Canada, Ontario. I now have connections in Calgary, so I'm hoping to do a bit more work there. I'd love to have some clients in the States. I spent a lot of time there when I was younger. Yeah. Oh, and Ireland, of course. I'd love to add value to my home country, and I miss New Zealand. I would love an opportunity to get back there and work. So yeah, I haven't limited myself with where I want to play.
Perfect. And if someone is seeking you out, two quick questions. When should they reach out, and how do they reach out to you?
I'm active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach me, Katie Muldrew. Other than that, my email is katie@collectiveknot.com, and very responsive to emails. So they're probably the two main places.
And what would be a immediate flag? Is it someone who is running into a problem, looking to evolve into they're upgrading or doing some sort of change? When should they reach out to you?
Ideally at the start of a project, that would be great. And not halfway down the track when things have gone wrong. That's also a nice challenge or a value to add, like to help a team get back on course real quick. Usually at the start of a project, and I'm doing a lot of work now with team collaboration and the principles of collaboration, training around that. And that's usually a really good foundation for starting projects. And then in terms of innovation, I guess it doesn't, like, at the start is best, but I can jump in anywhere and help.
I want to say thank you to Katie Muldrew. You know what? If you're going to rebuild a city due to an earthquake or other calamity, or you're just looking to make your space safer, healthier, getting people on board with projects, you maybe have some sort of major transition coming up, Katie's there to help you get the collective knot in together and bring your results into focus and have the team work with you so everybody has the right results.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.